right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Town CSD regular school board meeting for Wednesday, February 4th, 2026. We are called to order. Maria, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
We have 3 adjustments to the agenda tonight. The first one is to add a new agenda item number 6 after student recognition, and that is an executive session to discuss a personnel issue. We are adding some athletic stipends to the nominations, which is currently agenda item number 7, and either you put it in the left-hand part of your packet or I placed it on top of your folder, the second half of that page that lists all of those athletic stipends. Instead of me reading them all, I mean, we could read them all, or you can just take a glance at them. Maybe for the public, we should read them. I'm going to read them really quickly. Boys baseball assistant, Andrew Campbell, 35 points, 0 bonus. Varsity boys baseball, Andrew Hedrick, 54 points, 0% bonus. JV girls lacrosse, Hannah Billington, 35 points, 20% bonus. Girls varsity lacrosse, Wade Ward, 46 points, 15% bonus. Girls softball assistant, Davin Putanzu, 35 points, 0% bonus. Varsity softball, Ben Lauka, 53 points, 0% bonus. Varsity girls tennis, Lana Aru, 42 points, 10% bonus. Track, Sarah Mishmash, 40 points, 20% bonus. And track assistant, Jayla Tooley, 30 points, 0% bonus. So those will all be added under stipend nominations on the agenda tonight. And the third adjustment is that we are going to table agenda item number 8, the possible approval of the scholarship.
Okay, thank you. Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda? All right, minutes. We have several minutes to approve here. January 7th, regular school board meeting. January 7th, special school board meeting. January 9th, emergency joint school board meeting. January 12th, emergency joint school board meeting, and the January 29th special joint board meeting.
I'll move all of the minutes.
Second.
Amelia.
On the regular school board meeting minutes from January 7th, there is a change that needs to be made regarding item 7, C and D. The 2 years to fundraise was listed under the Southwest trip, and it actually should be the Spain trip.
What page is it? Yeah, what page is it?
It is page 5. Under C and D. It's just the fundraising component needed to be switched. Yeah, CD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it that whole sentence?
No, because the cost for the Spain trip is much more than $26.50.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's just we'll have to maybe just strike, although the cost per student is $26.50. Let's strike that. And then just if we say students will have 2 years to fundraise to offset the expense, that sentence gets added to D.
Correct.
Okay, so we can change those minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Amelia. All those in favor? Of the minutes, would that change? Great, approved. Next up, student recognition, Scholastic Art Gold Key Awards.
So Carolyn Brown is here to talk about these awards and to recognize the students who won them.
So these are my students I enjoy them. So every year Scholastic has a competition and exhibition sponsored by Maine College of Art and Design in Portland.
I'm sorry, Marcus?
Yeah.
For Maine and New Hampshire.
Ma'am, excuse me, could you just hold just a second, please? I actually meant to bring this up. I've heard a lot of comments about people on audio or watching the stream not being able to hear. Can we have all of our public folks use the microphone?
Sure, come on up. Yeah. Use that one?
Yep.
sorry?
Yeah,
Say that again.
let's start from the top.
Want me to say all that again?
Yes, start from the top.
Okay.
I got plenty of room.
You're the main stars. Hi, so I'm one of the art teachers at Camden Hills High School, Regional High School, Carolyn Brown, and so we have two students who entered the Scholastic Arts Regional Competition this year, and it's an annual competition and exhibition sponsored by Maine College of Art and Design in Portland, and this is regional for Maine and New Hampshire, and so any student can submit. And so we have lots of great students, and only two chose to submit this year. And so both Pi and Chloe fabulously both got the top award, which is a Gold Key Award. And so their works will be on exhibit at Maine College of Art in the end of February and early March.
Nice.
You guys want to show your pieces?
Let's see.
They're the stars.
Was there a specific prompt or kind of thing that you needed to work around, or was it just kind of submit what you wanted?
It was just really to pick a piece that you were most proud of and submit that, whatever it was.
Yeah, we can't quite hear you, Chloe.
So it was just whatever piece you most wanted to submit, I think, and it could have been any medium, I think, right? So there were specific categories for paintings and ceramics and that sort of thing.
So
So
when did you guys paint these?
I did mine in November. It took me like most of like November, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, I just like spent most of like my class time and like pretty much like every day for like 3 weeks, like working on the painting. Because I'd come in during like when I had class, and then I'd come in during every one of my study halls to work on it.
I think this one took me a similar amount of time. It was early last year, probably April or May, in Ms. Brown's class.
Well-
I wondered if Pi could tell us a little bit about the symbolism of the hands
Yeah.
and I just am curious if from your artist perspective, tell us the story a little bit of that piece.
So it was for an assignment about like expressive portraits, and I like when I think of like expressive portraits, I think of like just like multiple like profile views and like expressions of like a face, but like I didn't want to just paint like multiple like faces because I thought that'd be like too like bland, so I wanted to like make one big self-portrait of myself and then like hands that had like my expressions because I thought that looked like more interesting as like a whole piece.
Really cool. Lots of emotions there. It's really nice.
Amazing.
Well, the board will see both of these in the budget presentation that they're about to see tonight. And I'm sure they'll both be in the annual report as well, that will go out to the whole community. So you guys did a great job on those.
Thank you. Enjoy your night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Next up, we have an executive session to discuss a personnel matter, 1 MRSA 4056A. Can I get a motion to go in executive
So
session?
moved. Who was that? Cricket?
It was Marcia.
Marcia?
Anybody want a second? Cricket will second. All those in favor? Great, thank you.
Is everybody here tonight?
Yes. Sarah, can you just... Leanne, can you hear us? Can you say something so we can hear you?
Yes.
Okay.
You can't vote in.
All right.
I don't know.
Can you see us? Yeah, you can.
Can she see us? No, she
Yeah,
can
yeah.
Can she see us?
She can see us. She can hear us.
I know. We see Colin too, so we're all confused.
It's a nice picture.
I see you, but you're here and you're there, and I don't know what's happening.
Great. this moment, I would like to move that we hire Leanne Neal as superintendent in accordance with the contract and terms discussed in executive session.
Second?
All right, for the discussion part, before we go to a vote, no, actually, I'll do that right after the vote. All those in favor? Awesome. We have a new superintendent. I feel like there should be like white smoke or something. So we have Dr. Leanne Neal here with us virtually this evening, and I would just like to say that we've spent the last few months, pretty much since fall, really engaged in a national search across the nation, trying to get people to come apply for this job, and had some amazing candidates. Our process has been informed by our survey with the community, several listening sessions with parents and the community. We put together a hiring committee made up of board members, parents, educators, and administrators who reviewed all of the applications that came in, conducted a first round of interviews, and subsequently recommended 2 finalists to the board. Those finalists also spent a day in all 3 of our schools, getting to interact with our students and staff. And then the board had deliberations about who we felt was the right candidate for this job in this time. And I'm thrilled that Dr. Leanne Neal has agreed to come to Maine from Kansas. She has more than 30 years of experience as an educator, as a school building leader, and as a district leader. And tonight, we will have a number of messages that are going out to our staff and to our parent community that let people get to know Leanne a little bit more, kind of go over the process that got us to this point. We also have a message from Leanne, a written message and a video message that is also going out tonight. And we are looking forward to scheduling several opportunities coming this spring where Leanne can come to our district again and meet with all of us and our community and our parents and our teachers. So stay tuned for those opportunities. But since Leanne is with us, I wanted to give her the chance to say hello and welcome. And again, congratulations and welcome to our community.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Board Chair Maroka, and really the entire Five-Town School Board for the trust that you have placed in me and the opportunity to serve this very special community. I am truly honored and humbled to accept the position as your next superintendent. And based on what you just said, that sounds like a lot of Leanne Neal. So, but all kidding aside, I'd like to thank the members, not just the board members, but also the folks that came together as the hiring committee for the time and the thorough and intentional selection process that you put together. I appreciated your thoughtful and rigorous questions that you asked during the interview, but really most importantly, really each of you sharing your perspective, your pride in the traditions and achievements, and the possibilities really about what these districts and our students can achieve in the future. So a special shout out to Chair Maroka and also Camden Rockport Schools Chair Gutierrez and Assistant Superintendent Jamie Stone for taking me on the tours to the schools, because that truly was the highlight of my visit. When I first read the position description, I was really struck by how many things really resonated with me. Starting with the district's core mission of be kind, work hard, and keep learning. That's something that was instilled in me growing up, and those are things that I have tried to carry forward in my role as an educator over these many years. Also, the focus that you place on serving the needs of the whole child and ensuring that every child or every student that attends your schools has the tools and supports to achieve success. And of course, the innovative programming like the nature-based pre-K to the hatchery and so many additional things that I had the opportunity to observe. A lot of excitement and energy. So those visits were amazing. And the dedication, the deep dedication that goes across your entire staff. I enjoy the opportunity to see that, to engage with your students, and really experience the hospitality of the entire community. So for me, all of those elements confirmed that this truly is the right place for me. I'd like to congratulate Superintendent Libby, both on her success and her decision to retire, and wish her all the best for the exciting plans that she will have for her future. Most importantly, I can't wait to get there, to get to work, hit the ground running, to serve the students and families of all of your communities. So I'm eager to get to know you. I look forward to the visits, and I know that Chair Maroka said in the coming weeks, the district will be sharing some information about those opportunities, because I want to get there to hear your stories and learn about your hopes and dreams for the schools. So thank you again. I am humbled and thrilled about this incredible opportunity and the warm welcome that you have given me. And I'm so excited to join the team, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon in person.
Thank you, Leanne.
Great, thank you.
So she's going to continue watching the rest of our meeting. But I also want to just echo something Leanne said, and Leanne's going to be able to come here and build on a really strong foundation, and that is in part to a strong leader that we have had for 11 years, and so thankful to Maria Libby for getting us to this place, and for all of the incredible work that has been done in this district and in our schools for the past few decades under your leadership. I feel like there should be cake or something, but now we're just going to go into other agenda items.
Onward.
There'll be plenty of time for cake once Dr. Neal comes with us. So next up, we have stipend nominations.
So we have the 3 that are on your agenda, and then the additional athletic ones that we talked about during the adjustment section.
I'll move the stipends
Okay.
as listed.
Becky seconding. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Beautiful. We have nixed that one. Possible approval for requested travel, jazz band to University of New Hampshire, March 13th and 14th.
Is there anything you want to say about that, Jen? The trip proposal? It's in the packet.
It is in the packet.
For everybody,
so-
it's on page 22.
It is the Jazz Festival. Students have gone every year. It is a trip where we have just over 20 students, and they perform and get adjudicated. They have a review of their music. It is an exceptional experience for our students, and it is an absolute pleasure to listen to our jazz band, as probably many of you know. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
I think that's
I move to approve the possible approval of requested travel for the jazz band.
okay.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All those in favor? Perfect. Camden Hills phone-free update.
Do I want to come up, or we can do this together? Yeah. You want to just come on here? Or I can slide down. All right, I'll just pass you the. Can I, is Colin?
Colin,
Colin?
is Colin on? Can we?
Question for you.
Cooper hop over in this one?
Can I get on
Yep.
that one? Screen which one am I?
202.
Lewis Hall 202, so this should be alphabetical right there. Okay. And the code is 5222. Thank you. Okay. For those of you who don't know, I'm Cooper Marshall. I'm one of the assistant principals at the high school. I collaborated with our student board reps to
give an update on the policy, and provide some background information on how we got here, what it looks like, and then we also, the student reps put together a survey for students, and they're going to share some of the results of that, and we can put some of the data into context and talk through what that looks like, and then I'll share some of our staff data as well, and then obviously we will open it to questions. So how we got here, previously, before this school year, we had a policy in which students were not supposed to have access to cell phones during instructional time. And so the way we interpreted that is that anytime students were in class, including a study hall, they shouldn't have access to their phones. And so most teachers would use a phone caddy, which goes on the wall, and kids could walk in the room and slide their phones in. But each teacher had the ability to kind of create a system that worked for them. So some used baskets, but the expectation is that students didn't have access to their phone for the entirety of that class period. We felt like over the course of the school year that implementation mostly worked but was inconsistent, and that students were still relying on their phones more than we wanted to during the day. I know that at one point, you walk into the cafeteria during lunch or break and you'd see a group of kids sitting at a table, all friends, and, they're all staring at their phones. And so, that's something that we've just talked about over the course of a few years is, what kind of learning community we want to create and how to minimize some of those distractions, not just during instructional time. Some teachers also felt that the phones still felt like a daily battle, right? Those first few minutes of class, they still had to make sure that all 20 kids in the room put their phones in the caddy, and it just felt like every day it was taking up, a portion of their instructional time to follow this. So while we had this policy in place, we engaged in a year-long look at revising the policy. We had a community book read for The Anxious Generation, which many of you probably read as part of our book read last year. Maria led some community meetings at the high school with parents and other community members, and we partnered with local law enforcement around that. We did a school visit, and I think, Seren, you came to that, right? To Morse High School, which as of last year was the only school in the state using Yonder, who had a phone-free policy and was using Yonder pouches to implement that. So we wanted to just see what it looked like and talk to people at the high school. And we got feedback from staff, students, and parents. So, kind of the long and short of it is we really had an intentional, thoughtful look at different options and felt that this was one that was going to work well for our school. And then in the spring, the school board voted to transition to a full day phone-free policy, and we partnered with Yonder to implement that. So what it looks like in terms of expectation for students is that the first day of school, all students were assigned an individual numbered Yonder pouch. So we have a database that matches an individual student to their 3-digit number, similar to what we do with one-to-one iPads. So we gave students some options, and this was partially a recommendation from Morse High School as to sort of how students adapted to the policy at their school. So the expectation is that when students are in the building, if they have their phone on them, that it's secured in the Yonder pouch. So students could do that, or our student drivers could also elect to just leave their phone in the car. Students had the option of leaving their phone at home. We also have slots in the main office that students can just come in and drop off their phone and leave it in the office. And I would say we probably have about 25 students who do that every day, whether by choice or by our choice. Or they could secure it in the Yonder pouch. We have staff stationed at both morning entrances in the morning to both greet students, but also inquire about their phone status. And so students essentially have to tell us, they flash the pouch, they tell us they left it in the car, they left it at home, or that's when we have the phone carts out so they can just drop it right in there as they walk in. We have very clear tiered consequences for violations. And so, we try to communicate that. We communicated that to students and families in the beginning of the year. And as kids, if they do violate the policy, I always meet with them and talk through, okay, this is policy number 1. This is what's going to happen. If there's subsequent policies, this is what you can expect. So there's a really clear tiered system. And our philosophy, especially with that morning greeting, is we're going to trust you until you give us a reason not to. And so, students walk in and they say they left it at home. We're not searching bags. We're not having them turn out their pockets. We're going to assume that they're telling us the truth unless, they start to violate the policy. So the results I would say from an administrative standpoint, is that the transition's been effective. Phones are almost never seen in the hallways, cafeteria, bathrooms, or classrooms. We average about 1 to 3 violations a day. Some of that is, me. I might walk into a bathroom and see a student on their phone, and I tell them that I need to take it, and I bring it to the office. Some of that is teachers who either see a student using their phone and confiscate it, or what we've told teachers is you don't even need to confront the student. Just email Miss Daly and I the names, and we'll deal with it. So the goal was to centralize the approach, take the burden off of teachers, and really, let teachers teach and let administration, handle the behavioral issues. As I said, we have a clear ladder of consequences that we communicate. And I would say just, from my own perspective, I think students appear more engaged academically when I'm in class, when I'm observing classes, and especially socially. We have multiple blocks of unstructured time during the day, whether it's morning break, which is a 20-minute break between first and second period. And, it's great to just, the cafeteria is loud at that time because kids are talking and laughing. And, lunch similarly is a 30-minute block, and it's great to see students, really engaging in large and small groups and, not sitting on their phones. And so, that's sort of the administrative perspective, and I'm going to turn it over to our student reps to talk about both what they're seeing from their perspectives and also some of the feedback they got from students. So I'm happy to kind of go through these if you guys want to.
To start it off, we sent out a survey, I think a week ago, and we ended with around 300 responses, which is a little over a third of the school, but a really good amount. And I think, so the first one, one of the first questions was, do you actually personally follow the honor badge policy? So put your phone in the pouch and lock it. As you can see, not many do. I don't think that that's the most shocking thing from a student perspective. So yeah, that's a pretty good indicator of who actually puts their phone in the pouch.
And so what do you make of that in terms of how do you, does that mean from your perspective, are you seeing kids using their phones all the time, or what do you think kids are doing?
So personally, I don't see kids physically on their phone, especially in classes. I know people use it in the bathrooms, but I never see it. So I haven't witnessed any of that, but I do know people, if they have Macs, they search things up like Instagram or Snap on their personal computer. So I might not see phones, but kids are definitely finding a way around it. However, I think the Yonder pouch is really successful in the sense where or maybe not the pouch, but the policy where no kids are on it in class time.
And I think that's part of what the survey data is showing us, is that, there's, I think, a clear difference between how students are thinking about the phone-free aspect of the policy and how students are thinking about the Yonder aspect of how we're implementing it. Kids, we, by and large, have a pretty compliant student body, and so when kids are not compliant in large numbers, it really says something, and I think they're intentional about it. And so I think what we're finding is that kids, the vast majority of kids by and large, are okay with following the phone-free part, right? But they bristle at Yonder. They don't like the pouch. They don't like to secure it. And so what finding is that either they're leaving it in their car or they're just leaving it in their backpack and not taking it out. And so if you walk the building, you're not going to see a phone. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, the majority of kids are using the yonder pouches. Many are doing other things, but some kids are electing to just leave it in their backpack. And I think because of the way that we've gone about implementing it, where, we aren't searching kids' backpacks, we aren't going into classrooms and, requiring, instruction to stop so we can check people's yonder pouches, is that this is the way they've kind of worked around the system, is like, I'll keep it in my backpack, but I'm not using that pouch. And so feels like we're achieving the same end in terms of having a phone-free building. We're just finding that students, students do not like the pouches.
Saren, if you had asked, do you personally either put your phone in a yonder pouch, leave it in your car, or leave it at home, would you have had 60% of students who say, I never do any of those things? Or is this 60% don't physically use the yonder pouch?
Yeah, it's don't physically use the pouch.
I will say for most of the data, there's a pretty big distinction between, I think students in their head are definitely separating yonder pouch policy and phone policy, and that's reflected in the data, and I believe actually on the next slide. So do you use your phone during school, right? 51% say never. And like the rest of it is most likely either people checking notifications, right? Or people can mirror it off their laptops now.
And that's another workaround.
Exactly.
Just to like expand on that a little bit, we allow students to use personal computer devices. And I don't have a sense of the percentage of students that do that, but I'm told that students are able to phone mirror. And so teenagers are going to try to find a workaround to any policy that we have in place. And so I think we've had conversations ongoing as an administrative team throughout the year of like, what type of compliance are we going to be looking for? Like, are we looking for 100% of our students to use Yonder, or are we looking to have a phone-free building, and for have kids to be more engaged academically and socially and to not be using their phones? And I think we definitely, as an administrative team, are leaning toward the B, not the A. And I think in that sense, it's been effective. It's not perfect, right? Kids, I might walk into a bathroom during the day and see a kid on their phone. Oh, okay, I'm going to kick that to the office, right? But that's 1 out of 740 kids. And so I think, if you have stepped foot in our building this year, I think, if you compared what it's like to be in our building this year versus what it was like to be in the building last year, I think there's a pretty big difference in terms of the culture and the community. And I think the interesting thing about these results are there's a similarity in the way staff are feeling about it in terms of separating phone free and yonder. And so there, it seems like there's a collective sense among students and staff that they are okay with going phone free, but they have some negative thoughts about the yonder pouches themselves.
Okay, so you mentioned that the students are bristling at yonder. What is it about yonder? Like, is it just an extra step that's required? I'm curious, like, what the hang up is there.
It mostly is just convenience. 9 kids out of 10 that I know don't use the yonder pouch system. They just leave it in their bag, don't check it. It's never an issue. It's literally just at the end of the day, they don't want to have to wait in line to unlock it, or even some people like just sitting in their bags. I know a few examples. They've just gotten broken. Pouches don't work. It doesn't really matter. And then additionally, there was an issue towards, I don't know if it's been resolved yet, but towards the beginning of the year where because the unlocking stations are locked with padlock, and sometimes people were like kind of stressed out because this is back when yonder pouch compliance was like everybody was actually putting it in the pouch, and there's only one unlocking station because the other one was locked, and so everybody's trying to get on their bus, but there's a massive line to unlock it. It's mostly just convenience and time, really.
And we tried to build in some time for students to, have some additional time to unlock. But I think, as we've progressed throughout the year and kids get a sense of how we as a school are enforcing it, they know if we see your phone, then we're going to take it. so that compliance piece is like, we're gonna comply with the thing that you really want us to comply with, but if, you know, but again, I think it's the convenience. I think also some of the feedback from students and staff is there was definitely a shared sentiment around the cost of the pouches. We saw that a lot in the individual feedback. So that was interesting to see, because it's not, you know, not necessarily things that we're hearing in the day-to-day.
I'd love to, are the students gonna continue going through some of the survey data?
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of questions about how the students feel about it and things like that, and I'm assuming you're gonna get to it.
I actually, I was gonna bring this up at the very end, and I'll cover it more extensively then, but I put together a much more extensive 23-page report on it. So I'll make that available to you all.
It's really great, thanks.
But, for the presentation, so,
And this, I don't know if you guys want to talk about this. This kind of
Yeah.
relates to, this kind of relates to what we were talking about.
Yeah, so we noticed that like, kind of what we were talking about, the whole entire convenience thing, is that people truly don't believe that, like, for them at least, Yonder Pouch is necessary. And there's obviously a bias with who took this, because, like, if you're willing to sit down for 10 minutes and take a survey about Yonder, you're probably more likely to, you know, follow some sort of the policy. But, so roughly 90% of people believe that Yonder isn't necessary for them to follow this phone-free policy. But then I think that we have it on the next slide.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, when asked about then their peers in the building, it was much more split. So, like, there is kind of that difference between, like, personal belief versus, like, what people think the rest of the school would do. So then that kind of, like, fractures it between, like, almost the thirds about if people do think that Yonder would eventually fall apart, because there is some sentiment right now that, like, though people don't really care about the Yonder pouches, it's kind of like a floating thing. It's like, it's more of the idea that the Yonder pouch exists, so you know that you're expected to, like, have it on you. Even if you don't lock your phone in it, it's still, like, it's in the back of your mind. So it's very obvious when someone has their phone on them, because everyone's supposed to be, like, it's kind of unspoken. It's like, it's supposed to be in your bag locked. So it's much more obvious. So people are still going to follow it, even if they don't lock it.
And I actually, you know, and I know that we've talked about this as an administrative team, I'm confident that if we had just told kids we hadn't used Yonder, we had just said, just leave it in your bag, it would have been a lot harder for us to implement it. So I do think that partnering with Yonder and kind of what Ethan was saying, I think it has helped really make it clear to students that, you know, that this is the expectation, we don't want to see your phone.
And Cooper, prior to the Yonder Pouch,
Yeah.
it wasn't effective. There was a
Right.
phone ban
Yeah.
during class, and kids didn't follow it.
Right. It felt a lot messier.
Yep.
And I think you know, and so right, that I just think partnering with Yonder allowed us to get to where we are, even if not every kid is using the pouch to follow the policy. Did I skip one? No. Okay.
So the overall feelings of the policy,
Shocker.
they're pretty negative. I love it. I think a very, very slim amount said they actually feel good about the policy, but that would make sense. I think kids are very upset and have been for a long time, so I think this is a pretty accurate reflection of how the
And
student body.
when you say upset, are you saying upset about the phone-free aspect, the Yonder aspect, or both?
Probably both to some extent. I think kids, some students feel like they're taking away, like, not a right, but like something that they feel they should have. So I think it's a mix of both, and then they feel Yonder pouches are an added level of unnecessary enforcement. So.
And in terms of qualitative data, just from what I've read, and in the report, people are frustrated with they're saying that the Yonder pouches are time-consuming and also slightly wasteful in terms of resources. But at the same time, so they're frustrated with that, and then they're also frustrated with the the natural consequences of not being able to have access to your phone, not necessarily the lack of having a phone. So if, like, there was an alternative, for example, contacting parents for rides, right? It's an extremely common problem that was mentioned numerous times, and if there is an easier way to do that, I don't think students would have as big of an issue with not having their phones as more so the issues that causes.
Can I ask a question on that? It was one of the things I was wondering. I mean, in my day, you had to go down to the one payphone and call your parents, collect, and say your name, and they'd, pick it up. What do kids do if they have to have logistical conversations with people about pickup? And do they go to the main office and say, "Can I call my parents?" Like,
Yeah, that's exactly still the
do
case.
they
So
even
like,
know their parents' phone numbers?
yeah, well,
So we do have a phone in the lobby. It's not a payphone,
Yeah.
but it's you can go and use it anytime.
All right.
And it's pretty funny because we actually had to put like a how-to guide.
This is what this
This
is.
is how to use this because you had to dial 9. But also, like, kids can come in the main office, they can go through counseling. Like, we really try to make it.
I'm curious to hear from students though. Like,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about like how people feel about that and how that's playing out.
people don't like calling their parents on like I don't know, like we were saying before, like the whole entire thing about the Yonder pouches, students and like people in general really like convenience, and walking down to the office is not the most convenient thing for most people. So I think that people either resort to, if they're on a Mac, it's usually like texting your parents. And then of course, like I've had to call my mom on the phone, like down in the hallway. So like people do that as, like I see people there every single day. So like people are using that phone. I don't think that it's like a super like big issue. I think that for a lot of students who have access to some like Mac or something like that, they are able, if they need to like get in contact with a parent, they're able to do that. And then for people who can't, they're using the phone, and it seems to be working pretty well.
One
quick question, like, why not email? That's what my son does.
There was actually
That's a good question.
several quotes about that. My parents don't check email. Email doesn't work for me. There's so many things, and it's just kind of a culture shift, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a question about laptops. How many students use Macs, do you think, or have a laptop that they bring to school?
Like 15%, maybe?
It's dependent on grades, so.
Yeah.
The older you get, the more.
Closer to senior year and you're about ready to transition, they will often start at that phase. We don't have it at the 9th grade level. It's predominantly iPads, but perhaps 15% of juniors and seniors, but
It's not
it
like a
increases with seniors.
But yeah, senior, like right now in most of my classes as senior, like sometimes it's like basically like everyone has them, and at least like one or two, it's like like a large majority of people have them. But of course, like back in like 9th, like everyone used school issued iPads, so it does just progress as you get older. But it isn't a super large amount.
Can you text through the iPad?
Yeah,
Like
you can
iMessage?
text and FaceTime, I guess, but that hasn't really.
Wait, through the iPad or through the laptop?
Oh wait, through the laptop, not the iPad.
Well, I assume if you're bringing it in from home,
If
you
it's
can.
your
Yes.
own.
But what about the
device,
school issued
that you
iPad?
can email.
We removed that
Yeah,
stuff.
email's
We took
the
that
only
out in the middle school level, and then we took it out to high school. 'Cause
I
kids
will
use
note
that
though,
much in text.
kids have been kids and have found ways around it and can still do it. But that's just.
Just to point out one thing it's really hard to sneak this into the bathroom.
Yeah, and it's really
Really
obvious.
hard. And same thing with the iPad. So there's, albeit, they're building a better mousetrap, and this is why I have job security, and I say that all the time. This is what teenagers are designed to do. But the one thing that I am so happy with is bathrooms should be used for bathrooms. And they were not necessarily the environment that was the safest environment. If you're, no offense, this age group, that's how they would communicate. It was a snap, all of a sudden, 2 people somehow used the bathroom at the same time, and then it would turn into 10 people. Those things aren't happening. So I agree, they're actually doing a great job helping us field things we hadn't thought about. Great. But many of the issues that we're concerned with, which is it being on their possession, that's changed for the better.
And I didn't actually include that in this, but I'd say 2 major behavioral issues that we had in the last 2 years before this year was, vaping violations in the bathroom and bathroom vandalism. And both of those have gone way down this year. And, we don't have direct, evidence, but I do think there's a really clear correlation because, again, as Jen said, like, we have made it more difficult for kids to have those, the meetups, right, where kids are passing things around and like that. And then I think a lot of times with the vandalism, it was if a kid is in the bathroom alone, he's not going to vandalize. It's when they get in groups and they egg each other on, and decisions, and then their friend takes out their phone and films it. And so we're seeing a reduction of that. And I think that, I would argue it's a pretty direct connection to going phone free. We also, unfortunately early in the year had a pretty significant physical altercation. And I remember, one thing that I noticed in looking at the video footage from that is there were probably 30 kids that witnessed this because it happened during passing time. Not a single kid had their phone out. And in the past, there would be 20 kids recording that, and it would be up on Snapchat in a minute. And so, it's allowed us to, when we do have, those rare, pretty disruptive and, troubling issues that certainly impact the people that witnessed it, we're certainly reducing the number of people that witness it and really protecting the dignity of those who are involved. So that's been another, I think, benefit of having this, is that it definitely had an impact on behavioral issues in the school and also how we respond to it.
So I want to pose a related question to our 3 student reps. One of the big sort of points of rationale that were raised in favor of going Yonder Pouch was people weren't comfortable using the bathroom to go to the bathroom, as was just mentioned. If there isn't a question that was posed in the survey about that, is it your anecdotal sort of understanding that students feel freer to use the bathroom, or is there still some sense that that's where you go to vape or buy drugs or whatever it was before?
I can definitely speak to that. The girls' bathroom were really, really bad last year. Like, it was they would usually just hang out in one spot, and there would be like food and hair. Like, and once there was like fake eyelashes stuck to the mirror, so like it got really bad last year. And I would say that although it's reduced, from my experience, it hasn't left, and it's still like the place to meet up, especially in the one near the cafeteria. Like at breaks, it's still pretty bad. So I think it's like kind of built in that that's where some people go and meet, from what I've seen.
But you mentioned during break, right?
Yeah, and
Are you seeing it during class time, large groups, or during?
I don't use the bathroom much,
Oh, during class
but
time.
I think it's normally during breaks, but people definitely do meet up during class.
Ethan, you were going to say something.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
Sorry. Elder, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say that, like, I don't have that, like, this is, like, kind of a bad thing to interrupt. Just, like, I haven't really gauged from, like, my friends. Like, I never really had a sense that my friends were afraid of using the bathroom before. I never really used the bathroom at school that much. And, like, it was kind of one of the reasons was that it was kind of this weird place for people to congregate, and it was just, like, you didn't really want to be in that environment. When you walked in, it was, like, awkward because usually people would kind of try to talk to you, and it's strange. So, like, I still don't really use the bathroom at school. But that's just, like, what I've been doing for 4 years. So I'm not really sure about that. But I have heard from my friends about, like, the girls' bathroom, because that was, like, a thing last year, hearing about, like, the amount of people that would sometimes be in there, and that has been reduced. Which I think is, like, it's telling that, like, it's only really noticeable at break. Or it's only been noticed at break, because then everyone is there versus, like, when you were able to communicate across the school and then meet up, it kind of just reduces the amount of people that can, like, meet somewhere at a certain time.
So Ethan the younger?
So, I mean, obviously, it's only been this year and last year, but just what from I've seen is definitely a lot. I don't know about comfortability. Again, I don't use it as that often, just whatever. But I have noticed that the incidents are still happening. It's just at a much smaller scale. Probably harder to coordinate, stuff like that. Just more normalized, I guess. So it has helped.
So we've gotten an administrator point of view and student. I don't know if our teachers want to say anything about your experiences this year.
Can I share the data first around
Oh,
that?
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and then, if that's okay. So we surveyed the staff as well. And so these are some of the takeaways from that. So 88% of staff agree or strongly agree that the policies had a positive impact on the overall school community. 82% of staff agree or strongly agree that the policies had a positive impact on their classroom learning environment. 82% of staff agree or strongly agree or strongly agree that this policy is more effective than past policies, and 80% of staff think that we should continue with it. And then I just shared a few quotes that, staff gave a lot of feedback, but these 4 felt sort of thematically kind of encompassing a lot of the things the staff said. So I'll just leave those up there for a minute so that people can read them. I don't need to read all of them. But yeah, I'd love to hear from Jen and Rowena if you want to share anything about your perspective.
Sure. I'm Jen Munson. I'm an English teacher at the high school. Yeah, I'm Jen Munson. I'm an English teacher at the high school. This is my 26th year here at the high school. And I love the no phone policy. Absolutely love it. I think it's just kind of taken that off the table completely during class. Kids are a lot more focused, because even having the phone up on the pouch on the wall was like, I could see it. And sometimes you'd hear like a vibration and it would call to them. But I think one of the best things is I have lunch duty this year, and lunch is loud, like it should be. And the kids are talking to each other, and they're playing games, and they're having a good time, and it's so much nicer than having lunch duty and having friends sit at a table and stare at their phone, which would just break my heart. So I love the policy.
I'm Rowena Matulewski. I'm a math teacher at the high school. This is my 11th year. Let's talk about geometry. So I have typically 9th and 10th graders, some 11th graders, and for the last 4 years I have taught geometry. And I can safely say to you that the conversations in geometry have shifted tremendously from the last 3 years to this year. We're actually talking more about geometry and less about put it away, I don't want to see it, give it to me, right? That's great, and that's what it should be. And so when the focus is taken off of the procedure of, hey, you know you're not supposed to have your phone, it's supposed to be up in there, how come you have 2 phones instead of the one that's supposed to be in the caddy, right? Now we don't have to worry about the time wasting, instead we can focus on the education, and that's what it's supposed to be. So I'm a fan of the fact that we can actually have math conversations in math. Great. As far as the 3rd floor girls' bathroom, I actually went in today. It was very clean. I was very happy. Keep up the good work.
I'm not going to make any comments about the garden level boys' bathroom, which is next to me.
And, I would say I will always have a job in this school due to the bathrooms. I mean, it's a big part of our job is that's where kids go, because that's one of the only parts of the building where we don't have cameras. And so, so I'm not naive to the fact that it's still, a pressure point to some extent, but I do think that it has greatly improved the bathroom environment. The last thing I wanted to share is, if you hadn't seen it, our local paper, the Mid-Coast Villager, ran an article about our phone-free policy called The Joys of Looking Up back in November. And so if you haven't seen that, Google it. It was a really thoughtful article, not only about how we're implementing it, but how some other schools in the Mid-Coast area are doing things a little bit differently. So, yes. And are there any more questions for any of us?
Ethan Jr., I want that report. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Can you email it to us?
Yeah, so I had QR codes made. It was pretty, it was pretty extensive to print out for sake of paper.
You
So
better
it's.
not take out your phone to use it.
I'm an adult.
I have a few QR codes passed around, or I can just leave it here after the meeting.
That would be really awesome.
either way.
Thank you.
There were a few things about it that I wanted to say. One, I revised it just this morning. I just want to state it is representative solely of the survey results, right? It reflects the students' opinions and observations, but that might not be fully representative of the actual current situation. It also, when it's addressing the policy, whenever it mentions Yonder, it's talking about the Yonder pouch itself when talking about compliance and changes. And then any time Yonder isn't mentioned, it's talking about the overall general phone policy. And that's pretty much it.
So I just want to share, my daughter was one of the board reps, so this goes back at least 6 years. I called her to say we had 200 and was it 97 respondents? She's like, you're kidding me. So over that span of time, we have never, ever, I mean, these are kids, these are teenagers, and they don't have to do it. so they're invested in this topic, and the feedback they gave was great, but by far, the best results I've ever seen for a student survey. So they're engaged. It's a good thing. It's a good
Could
thing,
I
so.
just make one comment? Like, I know we have to move on time-wise, but there are some themes in here, Ethan's report, that I'm interested, maybe Marcus at a later date, if there's an opportunity to circle back. Like, one of the things I've been wondering about is the trust issue, whether this has affected that between students and teachers or administration. So a few things in here that I'm really interested to read your report, and maybe we could find a time to circle back toward the end of the year or something like that.
Sounds good. You know, and we're also having this conversation a couple weeks after the governor, state of the state, proposed having a statewide policy on this, and so great that we just knew this was going to happen and did the due diligence to, you know, do it on our own terms and not feel forced into it. But yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Any parting comments? Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks for the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
What a mess where it was.
I know. Well done, guys.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Next up
You'll
is
get extra credit.
approval of the 2026-2027 school calendar. And that is on page 26. Anything stand out to note, Maria? Is
No.
it pretty much?
It's pretty much the same as it's been the past several years, without any significant changes.
I move that we approve the 2026-2027 school calendar.
Second.
Any conversation? Questions? Okay, all those in favor? Terrific, thank you. Next up is FY '27 proposed budget presentation.
Okay, I'm going to run through the typical presentation that I give for the requested budgets. So this is for next year's budget, where we're coming in, and the expense increase is 3.93%, and the taxpayer increase at 5.48%. If you recall, the target had been 4%, so we're coming in a little bit under the target. Just for some context, kind of large picture stuff, we did spend some time fine-tuning interdistrict expenditures. We had some conversation about that, about transportation at the Finance Committee meeting. We are starting a major project, the windows and sidings, and we're phasing that in. This will be phase 1 this summer that's going into this year's budget. This is the last year of the current teacher contract, and we are this year going to be negotiating, but we haven't started yet, the support staff contracts. And fortunately, we are in a position to build both the capital reserve and the fund balance, which are both in need of bolstering, but we're in a position where we're going to be able to do that in a pretty healthy way through this budget process, which is good news. This is the 10-year October enrollments for the high school. This year was 739, that's 2025, so it was October of 2025, which was the start of this year. And the enrollment is projected next year to be 704. So you can see in the past couple of years, it will be about a 52 student decline. It had built up the past 3 years. You know, you can see looking back, it had been in the 690s for a while. Some major impacts that we'll go into more detail on when we get to those cost centers, but just to kind of give you an overview, we are in phase 1 of the siding and windows project. That's going to be about $120,000 added to the budget. We will have 3 fewer teaching positions in this requested budget. It's about $300,000. We have added an ed tech position that actually, is this, Chris? I don't know if this is not the right district for that.
Yes,
It is, Final Haven? Is that the high school?
Oh, no,
No, that's not, that's incorrect information. We'll skip over 3, pretend it's not there. That's the other district. We moved 1 ed tech position to be covered in local entitlement. Our health insurance is budgeted at 10%. We don't know where that's going to come in. We don't know what the range is going to be this year. We don't know what our increase is going to be. We expect it to be high. We've budgeted 10%. Hopefully, that's high enough. That's about $213,000 increase. And we've added 1.5 support staff members to the central office, an accounts receivable, and administrative assistant help for the facilities director, transportation director, assistant superintendent, and business manager. So those are some major changes on the expense side. On the revenue side, we lost quite a bit of state subsidy, almost $120,000. It's mainly due to a significant decrease in our subsidy to the towns of Rockport and Hope, and I'll explain why that happens later in the presentation. It is mostly due to numbers of students. We have a $74,000 increase in tuition payments coming to us from other SAUs. And we have an increase in the SAD share of administrative services of almost $120,000. So those things are changes on the revenue side that end up impacting the taxpayer impact.
Maria, excuse me.
Yep.
What's the reason for the increase in the SAD share of admin services?
Some of it is just salaries. Everybody's salaries are increasing, so the cost, we pay 100% of the cost in the CSD, and then it's split.
Right.
So anytime anyone gets a salary increase, it costs both districts more money to pay for that. So that's part of it. And some of it is just doing a finer job splitting those services in a way that is, more precise, I guess I would say.
Okay. Splitting the division of the total cost between the 2 districts is more
Correct.
precise?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we go line by line. We have a budget sheet, literally, which every single line where the costs are shared, from salaries, benefits, federal taxes, all kinds of those kinds of lines. It depends on who it is, but, it's professional development. In some cases, like it's the supply lines. I mean, supply lines have their own lines. Like custodial supplies aren't all in the CSD, but in the superintendent lines they are. So it depends on what cost center it is, but we've got a kind of a sheet that explicitly lays out exactly what the shared costs are.
Okay.
And some things, go, transportation services go the other direction. So some things go toward the CSD and some things go toward the SAD. Rent goes toward the SAD because the SAD owns the buildings and the CSD pays them rent. A lot of administrative services go the opposite direction because most people are 5-town CSD employees where SAD pays half the cost. And the way we budget for that, which is really important, Marcia asked a question at a recent board meeting about, just system administration cost compared to other districts.
Yeah, it's right in the warehouse online.
Yeah, something to remember when we're looking at the CSD system admin costs, it's for 2 districts. The revenue side offsets the SAD. So the CSD admin services is actually much larger in the expense side of the budget than we actually pay because we're getting $400,000 from the SAD that offsets a lot of the
We were
system
looking at
admin.
district-wide, it would just be the CSD number, right?
Well,
For both districts.
for both districts combined.
Yes.
Yes, but when you look at that, like per student, you'd have to actually calculate it with both districts in mind.
But isn't a lot of that increase because you're adding staff in the central office?
Some of that,
That's the half.
some of that increases there, so that 1.5 staff that are being added are split between the two districts.
Maria, remind me, the state subsidy is really, that formula takes into account real estate prices, basically, right?
That is
Valuation.
No.
part of the calculation is
Valuation,
the valuation, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So this is our sort of longitudinal look at our increases to the budget. The expense budget is in the top row, and then the impact to taxpayer is in the bottom row. And you can see FY '27, which is next year's budget, is a 3.93% increase to expenses and a 5.48 increase to taxpayers, overall increase to taxpayers. It varies town by town, which I'll get to later. And so the 10-year averages are, the expense budget average is 4.14, and the taxpayer impact is 4.4 over the past 10 years, but you can see the data there. So we've done a good job, getting expenses back down, sort of after that post-pandemic period when things were a little bit wild. So now I'm going to take you article by article, and there is that beautiful painting we saw tonight, and the other one was the first one you saw. So regular instruction is increasing by 1.1%. Teacher wage increases are budgeted at 3% at the top of the scale, plus half of our staff also gets a step increase as well. I already mentioned that health insurance is budgeted at a 10% increase. We had two one-year positions this year, a computer science position and a science position, that were created last year as one-year positions. We're ending both of those, so they're not in the FY '27 budget. And we're also eliminating one English position. So those are the three positions that are not being budgeted for in next year's budget that were in this year's budget.
Maria, what's the rationale with the elimination of the English position?
We're changing some things in the English department. We've had a lot of electives classes in the English department, a lot of them with pretty low enrollment. And we're moving toward a English 11. You guys approved that recently. And there were probably more students in those classes than in some of the electives, and there was capacity to reduce that department by one staff member without impacting, kids are still going to take English.
Yeah.
It's a requirement. We had a decline in enrollment we're not going to need, and it's going to keep happening, as we've been talking about for a long time. As things go on, unless something significant changes, our enrollment's going to continue declining, which is going to mean that we're going to need to continue to keep right-sizing all the way up through our system.
What's the projected decline for next year, though?
I just had that on a
You just
slide.
had it on the slide.
I'll go back to it if you'd like me to.
Or just if you recall it.
704.
It's from 739 to 704.
Okay, thank you.
So the next cost center is special education. We have a slight decrease in that overall line of 0.8%. We are moving the multilearner language, can't remember what MLL stands for anymore, wherever Jess is. Multilingual learner. We've changed the name of that position so many times that it's hard to keep track. But we are moving that position from 50% at the high school to 10% at the high school, because we don't have students who are MLL students at the high school right now. We are moving one ed tech to local entitlement, so that relieves it from our budget lines here. And then there are just other staffing changes and salary and health insurance election changes, that the overall budget is slightly decreasing.
A question about the previous slide. With respect to the computer science position removal, does that mean that that class and that program is eliminated as well?
I'm going to let Jen answer that question. Not necessarily.
We are in the early phases of getting course requests, and so really that always dictates the process. And really
individual that was hired for this position had some specialty in computer science education?
The two people
Okay.
that we've had in this role since we created it 4 years ago had specialties in it, yeah.
And with respect to the regular science program, how is this going to impact the sort of the four essential sections of the science curriculum, the geoscience or whatever it's called, 9th grade, biology, physics, and chemistry?
Yep, so it will not impact graduation required courses. I anticipate that this will have an impact on our ability to offer multiple sections of forensics. It will not impact horticulture because it is required to run our greenhouse. So there are certain essential courses, but I would imagine that electives will have to be viewed last in determining where our course numbers lie for creating teacher schedules.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the next cost center is the Midcoast Program Assessment. This is our contribution to the Midcoast operations, and there's a 23.1% increase there. That's just based on their budget and our share of their budget. Other instruction, which includes co-curricular and athletics, has a 5.4% increase. That's due to stipend increases. Stipend amounts increase each year along with the teacher's contract because stipended, the amount of money devoted to stipends in each stipended position is tied to the increases in the teacher's contract. And then officials' fees have increased pretty significantly for officiating athletic events. So that's also one of the impacts on this particular cost center. Student and staff support, which is tech, library, counseling, all kinds of different things, is a 5.9% increase. And that is due to some health insurance election changes of people who are paid out of this cost center. And we also budgeted 10 extra days for each of the 5 counselors, which had been left out of the current year's budget, but it's part of their contract.
I'm sorry, Maria, could you go
Yep.
back to that? So would a librarian position be in this category?
Yep.
Is there a plan to eliminate the librarian position?
No, not in this requested budget, there is not. System administration is up 6.6%. Central office support staff had a salary adjustment this year that wasn't budgeted for last year. There have been some health insurance election changes. We're adding basically a half-time accounting position and then a half-time equivalent for admin support for all those positions I had mentioned earlier: facilities, transportation, assistant superintendent, and business manager. The administrator 403B was under budgeted last year, so we fixed that. And it's just a reminder that 100% of the shared cost for both districts shows up in the CSD expense line for system administration, as well as a bunch of these different cost centers. But 50% of the share cost is recovered in revenues, which you'll see when we get to the revenue side. School administration is up 6.5%. It's really based on salary and health increases. Transportation, we are adding a half-time equivalent of office support for those positions. That's like the other half. Last slide had the 2 halves, and then this is the third half, which is 1.5. And there are some increases to the route contracts. So it's a 12.2% increase in the transportation budget. Facilities has an 11.8% increase. We're doing that project that we've talked about, siding and windows. We are replacing the intercom system. That's a $160,000 expense. $80,000 will come from the local budget and $80,000 will come from the capital reserve. We're adding a lease payment for a new truck and a new tractor. We are purchasing chairs for graduation. We have some, but we always have to borrow some every year, and we're purchasing the rest of what we need to have our own supply. We're adding that half-time office support. Electricity is increasing due to tariffs. Field maintenance, because we're going for a higher level of field maintenance, had a pretty big increase. And this is just a side note, we are planning to transfer $600,000 from the capital fund balance to the capital reserve. So at the beginning, when I had said we're in a good position to increase both the fund balance and the capital reserve, this is part of that. We'll have enough money in the fund balance to transfer a nice chunk of it to the capital reserve.
Maria, is that office support person also showing up in the business office budget?
I don't think we put that in the business
We
office
talked
budget.
about it when we had the slide up, but I just didn't know if it was in the number.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, the halftime accounts receivable person
Yes.
is in the business office.
Okay.
I can't remember, Chris, where we had, it's kind of complicated because right now, half of the central office administrative support person does transportation support. And so that's part of the shift of the full-time person that will be supporting them. We already kind of have half of that.
Okay.
That's paid for in the central office. That half is now going to be switched to supporting the business manager and the assistant superintendent. I think it's all in the central office line, though.
Okay, as long as it's not in both lines. that's
No,
fine.
no.
Okay.
Did I do the last slide?
Lost your train of thought.
So facilities, yep. So this is our debt service line. Our debt service is going down, not surprisingly. A little bit of that is due to the Midcoast, so our debt payment to Midcoast is going down for their building. And we also, this year, we had put $60,000 as a placeholder in case we went through the municipal bonding process for the siding and windows project, which we're not going to do. So we took that $60,000 out as well. So that basically is the 71,391 decrease in this debt service line. Typically, we can expect to see a slight decrease each year because the Midcoast is the only debt that we're carrying that falls under this line. Other expenditures, this is the board contingency. We have reduced that by $10,000. So we're budgeting it at $140,000 for next year.
And I'm sorry, Maria, was that 150? That was the first year we'd had it up that high, though, right?
Yep, it's typically has run at 50,000.
Okay.
Yep.
And what's the rationale for keeping it up higher?
The board asked me to keep it up high. So this is a summary of all of the different cost centers that I just went through. The total expense budget is $19,232,026, of an increase of just over $700,000 or 3.93%. So that's the expense side of the budget. Now I'm going to take you through the revenue side of the budget. And we're going to start with revenues that come to us from sources other than taxpayers. One of those sources is parents who pay tuition to send their children to Camden Hills because they're just willing to pay tuition to send their kid here from a different school system. And we are budgeting $23,000 for that, a slight decrease from last year. District tuition students are those students who have school choice at the high school level, whose districts pay tuition. And we are budgeting a slight decrease. We do expect slightly fewer students incoming from other towns. I think that this number will continue to slightly decrease as our enrollment decreases and as enrollment at other schools decrease. So I think that this probably will keep going down a little bit. We also have tuition that's paid to us from other school districts who send students in special ed to us, and we get more money for those students based on the services they need. And that is about a $19,000 increase. We're assuming we're gonna get a little less in interest payments than we got this year. And that's because interest rates have gone down a little bit, and we're trying to be a little bit conservative, not knowing what's gonna happen in the economy. Our athletic and activity receipts and our rentals and our miscellaneous revenue are all staying steady. That's an estimate. Our adult ed leased space is coming in slightly higher because that's just a cost of living increase that is applied to the rental cost each year. We get revenue from the state of Maine for teachers who are national board certified, and that goes to the teachers. It reimburses us for us paying the teachers. That's a little bit less because we have one fewer teacher. Well, actually, it's 3 fewer teachers who are national board certified than we've had in the past. The admin services from the SAD, you can see there's an 8.61% increase there, or almost $120,000. State subsidy basically offsets that. And superintendent agreement subsidy, we get a subsidy each year for the superintendent agreements that we have at the high school. We're expecting that to be similar to what it was this year. It's an estimate at $40,000. And we're planning to use the same amount of the carry forward as a revenue source if we need to use it at the end of the year to help meet our expenses. We haven't had to use that for a number of years. But overall, it's a slight decrease in our revenue sources from non-assessment sources of a negative 0.41%. So, yep. So that, we have $4.841 million coming from other sources. That's right there at the top, non-assessment revenue. Then we need to make up the rest of the budget, the rest of the expense side in taxpayer revenue. And that's split into a few different categories. One is basically the required amount from the state that we have to raise, which is our adjusted local contribution. Then we have debt service from Midcoast that we have to pay. And then we have other additional local, which is the amount that we spend basically above the EPS formula and above our debt that we need to raise locally. So we need to have that $4.8 million at the top from non-assessment sources, plus the total assessments from taxpayers has to equal our expense line. So if you add those two together, you get $19,232,000. It's 27. It's just if you add it up, the above columns, you're going to get 27, but it's just rounding. One of them's 26, one of them's 27. We don't put the cents on here, so those are essentially the same values.
Maria, do you mind if I ask a question on the previous
Yep.
Slide, the breakdown of the revenues? So when we're talking about the national board certifications, are those 3 fewer board certifications tied to any of the cuts in positions?
No.
No.
People have
just
retired.
Totally separate. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And then one last question, which,
yep.
You can say I can't speculate on this, take it offline, but is there, I don't know, a future in which, I'm thinking about the tuition from districts. As enrollment decreases across the board, are there districts within a reasonable geographic range of us who might at some point say, look, we're not going to continue to have a high school, and actually we're going to give choice, and maybe they're going to send kids to Camden Hills? Or do we feel like the outer lying geographic regions where that might happen are unlikely to happen in the future?
I think it's pretty unlikely. I haven't heard about any,
Okay.
high schools that are on the brink of closing down.
Okay.
Well, there are towns like Northport that could choose to send us
Right.
more.
Well, they don't, she's talking about schools
Yeah, I know.
that already
Yeah,
have a
but-
high
But we
school.
could increase them in other ways.
I'm just thinking about the
Well-
statewide trends and, you know,
Well-
whether we might be still in this area where we might eventually get some folks, but it sounds like.
I mean, that's, you're talking about not the districts, we currently draw from every district that we could.
Yeah, I'm not talking about.
You're talking about new districts who might lose their high school that would
Exactly.
give us new sources.
Exactly.
I don't see that happening.
Okay.
The other,
Owl's Head is
Gonna
thinking
say,
about
leaving
leaving
the
RSU.
But that's not for the well, maybe.
That would
for
be the
the-
high school.
yeah, it actually would
Yeah.
be.
School, yeah.
The Press Herald had a really interesting article about this, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
just don't know.
if towns withdraw from
That's
their
what Saint-
school
that's what
district,
St. George
Some
did.
are.
I mean, that's why St. George and, yeah,
Because the cost is too much, so, yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, honestly, it's a great deal for them to tuition to us as opposed to having, I mean, our cost is much higher than they pay us.
I see. So that's not necessarily gonna solve all our ills to get more.
Well, they're absorbing a lot of our fixed costs. If they went away, we wouldn't save a lot of money.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and I don't know if, you know,
Great
for a
deal
lot
for
of
us,
those
too.
towns, you know, Northport, we've recently gotten students from Damascotta, Bremen, that historically we haven't gotten students coming that far. But I don't think and like St. George, we have a lot fewer incoming ninth graders than we have in all of our other classes from St. George. As if other schools' overall populations decline,
That's true.
it's likely that we already get 80% of the students from St. George, but if they only have 10 students in their 8th grade class, you know, if their populations are also declining, it's going to impact us across the board as well.
And that reduction in the ninth grade is probably just decrease in overall population versus they're all going to Lincoln Academy or whatever. Do we know?
You know, Jen, do you know if it's a smaller class in St. George this 8th grade, or a lot more of them going to Lincoln Academy?
Or Oceanside for that.
Well, so the daughter of the principal at Oceanside is in the 8th grade class. And it really is adjusting the demographic of students going to Oceanside, which
Really
is good for
interesting.
that
Yeah,
group
good for
of
them.
individuals that have a good social network.
Sure, sure,
and
sure.
are going to a similar school. But the class actually isn't smaller. It is very unique situation that we have less than 50% of the available students coming to Camden Hills.
My understanding from some quick conversations with people about positions recently was actually our outlying towns in St. George are pretty stable in their enrollment. So I asked the question, like, are you, as we were looking at, you know, reducing
Right.
particular positions, are you looking at, you know, and it was, oh, no, we're not having the declining enrollment that's occurring there right now for the K-8s locally, and St. George is one of them.
We do have an increase in Northport, though, so,
Right.
you know, there's that.
Yeah.
Double.
Yeah, I was going to say, the numbers we're talking about, though, are really small.
1 to 2
But
students.
all 5 of them were excited.
That's great.
We'll take all 5.
Something.
Thank
So-
you. That was helpful.
The overall tax impact, the increase in expenses at 3.93% increase. Our non-assessment revenues are declining by 0.41%, and it all fleshes out that the overall taxpayer assessment increase is 5.48%. Below that is how it hits each of the towns. Appleton will be a 3.3% increase, Camden 7.4, Hope 7.7, Lincolnville 6.6, and Rockport 2.7. So just as a refresher, understanding how the state determines each town's share, it's based on both pupil count and valuation. So the state determines how much each town owes in the EPS formula based on the pupil count. And that's called the expected contribution, just sheer numbers. This is how many students you have, this is how much you are supposed to spend because you have this many students. Then they look at how much each town can afford to pay based on property valuation. So if your pupil count says you need to pay $350, and your valuation says you can only afford to pay $200, the state subsidy will be $150. It makes up the difference. If it says you have to pay $350 and your valuation comes back and says you can afford to pay $500, they say, well, you don't get any subsidy because you can easily afford what you have to pay. So you're called a minimum receiver. So that's basically how it works. Camden is the only town that's a minimum receiver. So all of the other towns, the formula spits out based on student count and says this is how much you need to pay, but the valuations are coming in lower, saying you actually can't afford to pay that much. So we'll make up the difference in subsidy. The other thing that is really interesting is it's not whether or not, like, Rockport's population declined by 5 students, therefore its share should be less. It's how much did Rockport's population change relative to the other 5 towns. So if Rockport declined by 5 students and Camden declined by 10 and Hope by 4 and Lincolnville by 8, Rockport actually could have the biggest increase even though their population decreased, because it's not about the absolute value of that. It's about the relative amount that things are changing between the 5 towns. That's true for valuation and pupil count. So in Appleton, the relative change in the percentage of students was that Appleton's student, I don't tell you how much it increased or decreased, but the relative amount decreased in Appleton, but just by a hair, 0.18%. Its change in value was 15.8%. They had a small increase in the subsidy amount. The pupil count decrease was very small, and they're going to have a modest increase in their taxes. Camden population, look at Camden's population compared to all of the other 5 towns. It had a 1.44% increase. So compared to everybody else, it had an increase that was twice as large as the next largest increase. That's why one of the reasons why Camden's taxes are going up a lot is because their pupil count went up a lot. And even though the valuation in Camden went up by 21.3%, Camden's valuation is well above what their expected contribution is. So they're a minimum receiver. At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter what their valuation was. It's only based on their pupil count because they can afford to pay what their pupil count says they need to pay. Hope had a slight decrease relative to the other towns in their population, but their valuation was pretty high, relatively speaking, 20.7%. They actually lost subsidy in Hope because the gap closed between what's expected. They had fewer students, so their expected contribution is less because they don't have as many kids, but their ability to pay rose. So that gap between what they were expected to pay and what their ability to pay narrowed. So they lost subsidy because they could afford more according to the formulas. Lincolnville had a increase in its relative population, and it had an increase in its valuation. So they got an increase, actually, ended up getting an increase in their subsidy because of their pupil count, really, because their pupil count went up. Pupil count, tiny changes in pupil count have a pretty big impact on subsidy. And Rockport had a 1.54% decrease in student count and a pretty small increase, relatively speaking, in the valuation. So they actually had a large subsidy loss for the same reason that Hope did. But Rockport's was much larger because their gap narrowed to almost them being a minimum receiver again. So we lost a lot of the subsidy we lost was in Rockport, and then some of it was in Hope. This is the impact per $100,000 home value. The average home in Appleton will see $29.79 increase in their tax bill. Camden, $103.87. Hope, $66.28. Lincolnville, $67.25. And Rockport, $45.12. other budget information. Our unassigned fund balance at the end of last year is estimated, we don't have our audit yet, to be $1.3 million. We're projecting it, that's supposed to say FY '26 end right there, that slide, so I gotta, will you take note of that? That's supposed to say FY '26 projected end, so at the end of this year, we're projecting it to be $2.1 million. Because it's as high as that, we can move money into the capital reserve. And that's what we're planning on doing. So we're projecting this year to end and the capital reserve to be at a really low amount, 168. Next year, we're projecting it to end at 713 because we're moving money in, and we're going to spend a little bit of money, but we're going to move a lot in.
Maria, just newbie question. The origin of the unassigned fund balance is budget that is unspent?
Basically,
Okay.
yes. Capital reserve, we'll have in a warrant article that will say, shall the school board be authorized to transfer up to $600,000 from unexpended balances to the capital reserve fund and expend up to $300,000. There's another mistake right there, Chris, $300,000 is missing a zero. From the said reserve fund to the capital items set forth below and for other unexpected and emergency needs. So we're planning to spend $135,000 from the capital reserve next year. $80,000 for the new income, $55,000 for a propane tank farm that's needed at the high school. We're asking to be able to spend up to $300,000 because there might be something that happens that we don't anticipate. So we always give ourselves a buffer there, but you know, we typically, I mean, sometimes we have to spend some of that money, but a lot of times we don't.
Is there another word we can use besides farm? It just sounds like we're gonna have like a field full of propane tanks.
Oh, yeah. It's gonna blow up.
I'm sure there is.
Cluster.
Array.
Right, there you go.
You also record.
Noted.
And I apologize if this is actually, I don't remember hearing about the propane tank piece before, but what's the need and where is it going to be located?
Chris might remember that better than I do.
So it's the HVAC upgrades that took place at the high school.
Okay.
Increased the need for propane tanks, and we need to pour a concrete slab. Current location is not going to change, but they need to be resting on concrete rather than on gravel or grass, and then have a fence around them. Protective barrier.
Near the Bree house.
Right, okay. Thank
By
you.
the loading dock.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We'll also have a warrant article that enables the district to expend up to $75,000 from the special ed reserve fund that already exists for unexpected private special ed placements. So that's just a sort of money in the bank we have in case we have an unexpected private placement. That just allows us to spend it if we need to. This article just allows us to spend other grants and other money that we might get in. We have to have a warrant article about our school nutrition program, and we're planning to raise $62,150. Last year it was $113 we needed. We need less money because we're getting more money in revenue from the federal government because we're serving more meals at the high school. This is an article that allows us, should we need to, make transfers among cost centers for amounts exceeding 5% of the total appropriation for any cost center. So that's if we need to do that. This just allows us to come to the board and the board votes on it. But we have to get voter approval to do it first. So we just always have this in here in case we need to do it. Adult ed budget is similar to what it's been in the past, some just small increases. But the total expense budget is up 3.96%. A lot of the expenses are covered in other ways other than taxpayer money. Enrichment, and other things, but we'll get to that in a second. But, so some other expenses, the expenses in the second part are covered by fees and grants. They're not covered by taxpayers. So about $90,000 of expenses are covered through other grants and things. So the total expense budget is $527,000, which is a 2.16% increase. And the amount from each town, which is based on the same share that is for the regular budget, are seen here. It's about a 1% increase. There's a larger increase in other revenues. And so again, our total revenues equal our total expenses, and we've taken out the things that are covered by other fees and grants. We've actually not gotten this state subsidy yet for the high school, so we put in the same thing we got last year, but they haven't given us the numbers yet for adult ed. So that's an estimate right now. And that is the budget. Are there questions?
Good job, as usual.
Good job.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Got all that, Leanne?
Yes, I did. That was a great tutorial.
All right, so this, just for the public's knowledge, next steps in terms of further presentations and dates that people should know about?
Yes. I wish that I had them in the top of my head, and I don't. The next,
Are they in people's binders?
we can check, but in March, at the March board meeting, we'll go over any changes to this requested budget with the board. Probably will not do a full presentation, just talk about changes. April is when the board votes on the requested budget that will eventually go to taxpayers. We have a session for select boards in March, but I can't remember the date that that's going to be for all 5 towns. We'll have a SAD and a CSD session for select boards. We have a public input meeting.
I think it's the 11th for the select boards.
Okay, so maybe March 11th for the select boards. And then our public input meeting is on May 11th for both districts. I think they're back to back. One is at 6, the SAD's at 6, and the other one is at 7. So that's in May, and then the referendum is in June.
Did you have a
The referendum
That list
meeting?
of dates, can you just email that, or have it emailed to us,
referendum
please?
vote?
Yep, I think, yep.
Budget meeting is in June? Where we
No,
meet?
the referendum, the vote is in June.
Yeah, at the poll, but.
The budget meeting's on May 11th.
May
I'll
11th.
send it to your board email right
Thank
now.
you.
Yeah, at one point I thought those were in board
Yes, I'll send
folders,
it-
but
I'll
I don't
send it
know
to
what
the-
happened to
I'll send
them.
it to the board emails.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, many opportunities to absorb this again and again and have input.
Oh, it's supposed to be in the board folders.
Next up is student representative report. Soren went and shadowed the Secretary of State. So we thought it'd be good to hear about your experience.
So I have a little presentation. It's quick. So, so, one second. I'm not a very techie person. Okay,
Oh,
there we
here we
go.
go.
So, I was shadowed Shenna Bellows a couple weeks ago. So for some context, she's the Secretary of State, and right now she's running for governor. Yeah. So how I heard of this opportunity was it's actually kind of a funny thing. I was at some program, the Senate Youth Program. I was a finalist, and one of the judges actually presented this opportunity. So I got to spend some one-on-one time with the judge, which was cool. And I also got a shadow. So the first half of the day I can't actually share much about it because a lot of it is like confidential, but we kind of started off by a couple people from Harvard came and interviewed her about like banned books and stuff for the report. So got to listen into that, and then she went on air and talked about her upcoming or like the things that are going on in Maine right now. So we got to listen to all that stuff. Oh, there's something. She spoke a lot. Like she did a lot of interviews. I think in all it was like 5 that day. So she was constantly on the run and prepping for more.
Sharon, is that typical, do you know, of her days?
I think they kept saying how lucky I was, so I think it was a really busy day I went. But I know she's really busy, especially with her campaign for governor, so I think she's usually busy. The second half, we went to the state capitol building, which I have a photo of. And they gave me a little tour, and I really loved it. I felt at home when I walked where, like, the senators, I was like, oh, it's amazing. So I really liked the tour, and then we saw her give, it was a meeting about how it's important for politicians to ensure that their, like, public information isn't online. So I got to hear her make some remarks, and it was pretty interesting. And then we saw her get another interview. And yeah, that was kind of the whole day. I think the biggest takeaway I had was many people were drilling her over and over again, like on the spot questions. And it was really cool to watch how focused like she was able to get and how she was able to answer so well. Another one was that people kept asking her the same question over and over and over again, and I was amazed how she was so empathetic and was like able to answer her because I feel like I would have gone bored. But that was really cool to watch. And that's a photo of me and the other person shadowing. If there's any questions, feel free. I have also some good news. I'm starting a club at my school. It's called Can We, and it supports bipartisan conversations in the classroom as well as it equips kids with vital communication skills. Yeah, I'm starting that. And about like the phone policy, I worked with Drew Himmelstein, actually, who Mr. Marshall shared, and I also wrote a little thing. So if you want to read my thing, it's on Nicholas Villager. So yeah, do you have any questions?
Sounds like a packed day. Did you learn many insights into kind of what the Secretary of State does? I mean, she did a lot of interviews, you know, she gave some speaking engagements, but did you get part of it kind of, what is her duty as this constitutional officer in our state?
The thing that actually surprised me how in-depth she goes was she's like the head of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and she spoke a lot about that, which was interesting. So I got a lot of inside scoop on vehicles, which is cool because I got my license like a week before. So
Good timing.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Board Chair's report. We have a special board meeting, joint board meeting next week to continue our conversations from the winter board retreat. So look forward to continuing those conversations. And then I would just mention that last week I submitted testimony in favor of LD 2106, which would keep ICE out of our schools, libraries, hospitals, and other sensitive places without an actual judicial warrant, and also protect people's data from being given without proper warrants. And that relates, I guess, to one of the things Maria's going to talk about in her superintendent's report.
I thought that was a great segue.
Yeah.
We met as an administrative team to just review and tweak our protocols for what to do if ICE agents came to school. And we had some really good discussions on our administrative team about that, updated some stuff, which has been kind of fanned out to all the people who need to know. And, you know, like Marcus said, the Superintendent Association also basically joined in an effort to actually reinstate a policy that says that they can't engage in any enforcement activities in these sort of safe spaces like schools. So it was good that the superintendents are doing that. I'm going to be in Nashville next week at the National Conference on Education, and there's actually a special session that we were notified about today that I registered for. It's for superintendents from across the country to talk about what's happening in their schools and how people are handling immigration activity and enforcement. So that should be really helpful to get that broader perspective as well. We're trying to move along with the Rising Tide project. We had a meeting a few weeks ago to try to finalize plans. The architects are still hopeful that we can do that project this summer. I think we need to just keep applying pressure to make sure that it happens because it has not gone out to bid yet. So I'm trying to keep the pressure going on that and get them the answers they need so that they can do the bid package and get it out to bid. Windows and sidings project is with an energy company that we're going with that lease purchase agreement. The bids for that project came in less than we had expected, which is great news. It's not what we hear these days that much. We did shift one project, which was replacing the exterior doors at the high school that we thought we were going to have to fund in the local budget. We put that back into this project. We had taken it out because we thought it was going to come in too high, but we put that back in. We've been working with EMC on several projects. They did the HVAC project at the elementary school, the HVAC project at the high school, and now they're doing this project for us. And I just wanted to say they've been exceptional to work with as a company in so many ways. It's hard to explain, but they have been great to our school system and district, and they do a great job overseeing the work that's being done on these massive projects. And they do a great job with communication and keeping us informed of the progress. So I think that's all that I wanted to share. If you had any questions, I'm happy to answer. I am going to be away most of the week next week. I'm leaving on Monday afternoon for 2 different events. And actually, one of those events is I'm hosting a rural roundtable discussion with the superintendent from Yarmouth. And I got contacted a few weeks ago to do a podcast in anticipation of that particular session. I did the podcast episode yesterday with the people, and the people who did it they're doing a podcast for the conference. AASA has hired them to do this daily podcast for the conference, and they do some ahead of time. And they just chose our session for a variety of reasons. It stood out to them, and I'll send that out when it's aired.
I thought way back you told us the siding was going to look different than what we had now. It's not going to look
No.
different? I thought it was a different color or...
No, it's going to be a slightly different, warmer, more beautiful shade of green.
Okay, so we
But
won't
it's
know.
going to look very similar.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Maria, about, maybe this is a Jen question too, about the immigration enforcement. Have we seen any changes in attendance around? No. Great. Thank you.
Looking at your report, it just underscores that there's a lot of facilities, things that are happening and continue to happen beyond your tenure. And so the importance of having our smooth transition plans and making sure all that kind of gets done in the appropriate way is going to be key. Next up, administrative reports. Jamie Stone, our Assistant Superintendent.
I have a report in the packet, and I'll just highlight a few pieces. One is the winter convocation for superintendents was in January in Portland. The first day was a great workshop around district-level AI implementation, so I have some work to do to review some of those policies and look back at some of the work that Dr. Carlson had done around AI and student use and also employee use. We also dug down to the teacher level tools and learned about a couple of really supportive tools that would allow teachers to use some AI assistant support, especially in the area of mathematics, that I thought was really interesting. It would allow students to kind of independently navigate some opportunities, especially for high school age students that are seeking support and wanting to like work through and forward ahead. So Colin's been looking at some privacy agreements with me to see what we're able to utilize and what we're not able to utilize, which is an important step. That takes a little time. And then I was able to work with the high school on the January early release day, and we had a great workshop around experiential learning and just getting kind of on the same page about some common language about what we mean when we say that, and reviewing units that teachers have been doing. And teachers completed a survey where they were able to speak to things they were celebrating and doing in the classroom around experiential learning. Things are like relevance and using authentic audiences, having products that could be public. So there's a lot of great innovation happening there, and there's also a lot of great interest in more innovation, so that's really exciting. So Jen and I are working on kind of how to carry that forward next. And the last piece is we are in the process of drafting an education framework that's just to help make, concretize our values around curriculum and instruction, being experiential and relevant, and encapsulating student-centeredness and outdoor ed. And that's not really kind of anchored anywhere. It's in a lot of handbooks, and it's in our current strategic plan, but a lot of districts have an educational framework, and I think that's an important thing for us to actually kind of put together, wrap arms around, bring to the board before Maria departs, just so, again, the way we think our school should run with teaching and learning is really public, and our values are clear around that. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Next up, Jess Yates, Special Education Director.
She did have to run next.
She has her report in our packet, I think. Yep. And she'll be back at the next meeting. Jen Curtis, you didn't leave.
I didn't leave. And given the overall, everything's very serious today, I'm going to stick with some of the highlights that I want to share. That Michael Anderson, if you came to the Finance Committee meeting, he probably spoke maybe 3 different sentences tops. He's such a humble man. He's doing a phenomenal job. For us to have our state subsidies at almost $500,000 is a testament to the fact that kids are choosing to participate at higher rates within our school lunch program. I always talk and laugh about how we have 2 breakfasts, but it really is a highlight for our teens. I've never been in a school where the adults eat willingly with the students. At schools I was at, I would actually pay them to make sure that there were extra people in the
At least
cafeteria.
paid for their lunch, right?
I paid for their lunch. I swear I did. I paid for their lunch. So in my board report, it talks a little bit about the January fish cake event. Phenomenal. Hold on. Don't steal all of my glory here. So, of course you did. Of course you did. So one day we had monkfish, and it was like, what is this? And then we had it again. We were like, okay, I'm not really sure where we're purchasing things. And what I found out later on is the Fishermen's Association in Maine. So if their local fishermen are unable to sell whatever it is that their local catch is, then it's purchased by this grant. And the communication goes out to all of the schools in the state. Michael got in his car, drove to Brunswick, picked up said monkfish, brought it back, and we had a lot of variety of monkfish for a little while.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious because I had no idea. I mean, I think this is just what is representative of the individuals I am very honored to work with at Camden Hills. Like, he never said a word. One day I got a phone call that said, hey, can you get on a Zoom call with this group of people? Well, come to find out, they were so excited. There was a film crew coming. They wanted to interview students. And all of this was done by Michael behind the scenes. Somehow he fit this into his schedule. So I just want to highlight that I'm very blessed to work with the people that I do, and it's a tribute to just the work that goes on that no one sees, that really makes, Camden Hill special. So I know there's other things on my board report, but it didn't feel nearly as fun to talk about. Happy to answer any questions. As Becky noted, I'm sure you read it thoroughly. And so I'm happy to take questions, even about the monkfish. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jen.
Standing committee reports. Finance met January 7th. Minutes attached. Met before the school board meeting tonight. Finance update. Becky.
Yes, the finances continue to be very much in line. Year-to-date, based on 2016 of 26 payrolls through January 31st, target is to have spent 61.5% of our budget. Actual is 55.8. Fiscal year 25, same period a year ago, we had spent 55.8% of our budget. And the administrators and directors offered an overview of their budgets for 2020.
Okay, thank you. Joint personnel has not met. Joint policy met December 16th. Amended minutes in the packet. And then we have some second reads.
Yeah, we just had a second reads that I will move.
Second.
I got a discussion.
Yep.
On page, I don't know if there's even a page here. Let me go back where I'm going. What page is it? Yeah, page 59 of 64. We gotta add in reasonable suspicion for searching a vehicle. It's mentioned on page 62, the reasonable suspicion, but in the new, added text, there's no reasonable suspicion that needs to be added. Search a vehicle. I guess that's what, yeah. I'll amend it. Do you follow it? So if you go back, if you go 2 pages past it on page 62, it mentions students' vehicles if it is parked on campus and reasonable suspicion exists to believe it contains items. So you need to have reasonable suspicion to get into a student's vehicle. So it just needs a copy, whatever, 2 pages later.
Where would it go?
I don't, be subject to search by school administration.
Provided that
Yeah,
suspicion
yeah,
exists.
and reasonable suspicion exists.
Provided that.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'll second the motion.
You got that? Yep, good, okay. All right, any other discussion on the amended motion?
Or do we have to vote on the amendment first?
I don't know.
That's what I just asked for discussion on the amendment.
Oh, you said you said the motion as amended, but we haven't amended the motion yet.
I didn't say the motion as amended, but
Don't argue with me.
Any-
Thank you.
you're the one arguing me, Rick. So, does anybody have any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of it? Thank you. The amendment has been passed. And so, we will vote on
I will amend the motion.
Amended motion.
the amended motion. All those in favor? Thank you. Board Advisory Committee reports, Midco School of Technology.
So there are approved minutes from the previous month's meeting in your packet. And they just completed their fiscal year 25 audit, and their outcome was excellent. Tour season is on with roughly 450 to 500 students and staff attending the tours. Student shadowing is now underway, and they are prepping for Skills USA competition, which will happen in March.
And we're increasing our marketing because we didn't fill every spot last year, so just to keep the board aware of that. They've been coming to lunches, and we've been looking to promote it at a higher rate.
What happens if we don't fill our spots?
Someone else takes it,
Okay,
but we pay for it.
we still pay for it.
We still pay for it.
Because gives us a 3-year average.
Yeah, so we're working really hard to make sure that our spots that are allocated for us and paid by our district are filled by us.
Can I ask a question about that, and maybe students chime in if you have perspective? What do we think the obstacle is to us not filling those spots? Is it awareness? Is it scheduling? Is it, I don't know, like reputation, or people thinking there aren't options over there when there are?
It consumes an entire day. So in a student's world, they have 8 available periods. MCSD takes up 4 of them. And all it gives you is an applied academic credit. So it's not, the path to get a student there isn't for them to see that it's a graduation path. It's a potential career path. We have to go past the really basic conversation and get a student to see it as maybe a way of learning about an interest that they have, something that will maybe get them into a post-secondary opportunity or a career path. That, I believe, takes longer, more in-depth communication with the counselor. This year, we are marketing to parents so that communication can happen at home, and we can get them from both sides. I think I said it in the last, I can't remember which meeting, board meeting, but the Pied Piper of the program was Piatt Lammer, and we need to figure out a way to continue to having those in-depth conversations, because they do make a difference. A student's not going to go there because they are like eager to graduate. They're going to go there because they see greater value in the education they're receiving. Industry standards, industry certification, that's a sell to a kid who is like, how many classes do I have to take? And it really does fill their schedule. So there has to be some incredible value.
They also offer concurrent enrollment in 3, in math, science, and history. So getting the word out to the students that they can get a concurrent enrollment credit, and that they also can get at the high school, but a lot of the students don't know that they can do that.
Another question I had, and you might know this, Amelia, is back when I was at the middle school, we were having a pretty nice increase of kids wanting to get in there sooner, and the slots were full, and it was more competitive, so it was harder. There were conversations about expanding the number of concurrent sessions so more students could attend, because if you're a college-bound student and you're taking a foreign language, like that's 5 credits, is MCST ever going to expand those options so kids can attend, still be college-bound, kind of dual track? Because I know that's definitely a conversation among students, and I don't know how to, I don't know if there's any conversations
I believe
about
they can take 2 academic sessions. Their blocks look like it on their calendar. Maybe it's
Yeah,
One.
just one?
And it really
Okay.
depends on the program. There
Right.
are, their outdoor leadership, 0. Academics can go in alignment with it. It really
Yeah.
does depend.
Yeah.
It's only one. They have 2 sessions because they break it up into which session the students attend.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can only do one, and it
Yeah.
really is not a universal.
Yeah, so you have to dual
opportunity.
enroll into the early college classes, or you have to have more credits from freshman, sophomore year. You got to do a lot of like pathway work. Is that what you mean by
You have to do a lot of
communication?
planning.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
consumes 4 classes, but it's an applied academic, and all you need is one applied academic to graduate. So there just has to be a much more thoughtful conversation going into it. But hands down, it's worth the time and investment.
Yeah.
because
And
it's
you
a
do
great
get a
program.
financial literacy. It does fulfill that requirement
Fulfill
as
that
well,
requirement for graduation.
which
Yeah,
I did
that's
not
a
know
carrot.
until, yeah.
It's a tiny carrot, but it's a carrot.
Carrot, yeah.
It's a carrot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amelia, blunt question for you. Do they care that we're not filling our spots? 'Cause they're
Absolutely.
filling them. They do,
Mhm.
okay. Because I didn't know if like, who
the average
cares?
bowl.
Someone else will come in and fill it.
No,
You can pay
there's
for it.
actually an ad hoc committee. They're trying to work with middle schools, because basically if the students don't hear about the tech school in middle school, it's kind of like if you hear about it in high school, maybe you'll go. Whereas if they're more, like St. George has a fantastic program that's happening in the middle schools. And their goal, the MCST is trying to work with area schools, or figure out how to work with area schools to not overburden middle schools, but make it be project-based learning. How do you get these kids aware, make them aware in middle school so that a tech school might be of interest to them?
And I meant specific to Camden Hills. Like, do they care that we're under underutilizing because,
Oh, yeah, it's in the minutes
Okay,
from
okay.
in your last month's packet. It's a whole paragraph about it.
We'll go back.
Yes. There was like
And
the
we-
CNA
and we
program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're paying for them
Right.
anyway.
Right.
And it's an opportunity that we have the volume of students and we have exceeded what they have allotted for availability there in the past.
Right.
It has been a very rigorous process that, students really were vying for. So we can get back there, we just need to remember that it takes more time to have those conversations and thoughtfulness, because it isn't an easy path, but it is a really valuable one.
No, and we've had a couple students come back that have gone on to med school that took the CNA program and said they breezed through their first year of med school because they had the CNA program at MCST. So there's definitely bonuses, it's just how to get it out to the broader public.
Thank you. We see we have some future agenda items. One final congratulations to Leanne, and we'll see you next time. And with that, we will adjourn at 9:30.